Virtual reality, a genre of gaming that boomed almost 10 years ago as the newest and most immersive way of playing games. In the last few years though, VR has started to slow its growth, and it's becoming rarer and rarer to hear any good news about innovations in the industry. So after debating for a bit about VR as a whole and whether it'll survive, I booted up my old headset for the first time in a while, and I couldn't help but think to myself, can VR make a comeback? Like many people, I first heard about VR back in 2016 when I was watching DanTDM play Job Simulator, and I was completely blown away. After that, I saved up for a PC in 2018 and got an HTC Vive the year after, the exact same type of headset I saw him play on 3 years prior. When I first put that headset on, I absolutely loved it. I spent ages playing through all the games I'd seen on YouTube. Beat Saber, Job Simulator, Pavlov, Budget Cuts, the list goes on. Fast forward a year and it's the height of the pandemic. Everyone's stuck inside and there's no real way to meet up with friends. Aside from VR. Around this time, games like VRchat, or for me Rec Room, got really popular. VR became much more mainstream than it was before, making people who previously wouldn't have even considered buying a headset get one, just to connect with friends, or even to make new ones. Social games were booming. Being able to hang out, watch YouTube, go paintballing, have adventures, all while stuck inside felt like such a huge step forward, not only for VR, but for gaming as a whole. If you ask anyone who owned a VR headset at this point in time, I'm sure they'd say it was the pinnacle of what VR's managed to achieve, and I fully agree. Some of the best experiences in the medium to this day still come from the massive releases like Half-Life Alyx or Boneworks around that time, and the future was looking bright for the industry. Not only that, but for me, 2 of my friends also got a headset around then, and we all logged on pretty much every single day to play Rec Room together. But unfortunately, it didn't last. As restrictions across the world started lifting and interacting with people in person was finally available again, people started to think, why the fuck are we meeting up online? The demand for VR after the pandemic was at an all-time low. The golden age of mainstream VR had started to change, and people gradually stopped using it as often as they once had. Not only had the main reason for many people buying VR headsets disappeared, the magic had started to wear off, and a lot of the issues people had with VR started to become much more apparent than they were before. The headsets are heavy, the controllers are clunky, you're tripping over wires whilst trying to fight enemies. Playing VR is a big hassle. Not only that, but it's expensive too. Spending thousands for a PC good enough for smooth gameplay in a VR headset isn't really realistic when it's no longer necessary to have one to be able to meet up with your friends. When the choice is between playing some video games or buying a car for the same price, it's a no-brainer, so it's understandable why the industry slowed down. And I think this is where the biggest challenges VR has faced in recent years have stemmed from. Don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole downfall of VR spiel, but I do think I have to address some of the biggest problems the industry faces before I can tell you why I still think it can make a comeback. There's a couple of main problems the industry has had at the minute which have stopped it from progressing, the first of which being the amount of people buying new headsets, as I mentioned before. The lack of people adopting VR recently has led to a much smaller market than there was back in lockdown, with less big games being developed than ever. Even I've still stuck with my old HTC Vive after all these years, although I did upgrade to the Index's finger tracking controllers, so I can do this. Anyways, what this means is that the vast majority of AAA developers, and even indie developers, can't justify making a VR-only title, or even implementing VR into their games, since the demand just isn't worth the cost. Take a game like Phasmophobia for example, which though initially started as a really popular VR exclusive game has turned towards focusing on non-VR gameplay, to the point where it's almost unplayable in virtual reality and remains plagued with issues that the devs have no incentive to fix. Not only does this mean that no big games are being made for the systems, but also existing games are struggling to keep their player base and stay afloat. In the past few years, even Rec Room's development team have downsized, with almost half of their staff being fired in August, since they can't maintain the size that the game once was. Free weekly item skins unlocked through challenges turned into bi-weekly, then monthly, then now don't exist aside from having to pay for them in the shop. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lose-lose situation. Companies don't want to make and maintain games for VR since there's not a big enough market to justify it, and the market won't grow since there's not enough new games to justify consumers buying a new headset. It's a really sticky situation for the industry to be in, which is why it's one of the main reasons VR has been stuck in this sort of limbo period for so long. However, luckily, or unluckily depending on how you look at it, the VR industry has managed to keep afloat, but it had to make a deal with the devil, Meta. Affordable headsets, wireless gameplay, no PC required, but it comes with its own costs. To their credit, Meta has invested a lot into the absolute sinkhole that is the current VR market. They've made year-on-year losses to try and maintain the industry, but they've had to change a lot of what made people enjoy VR in the first place to get there. Meta have tried to keep their rules and regulations the same across their platforms, and their VR headsets have been no exception, and unfortunately that comes with plenty of issues. Pretty much the entire library is targeted towards children, loads of games are AI slop, and there's almost no cross-platform. In fairness, I can kind of see why they've got some of their rules in place. I mean, I'm sure it's not a necessity to be able to behead people in a nightclub game, but being able to get permanently banned from your headset you've spent money on for breaking the rules is kind of crazy. And if the focus on wrapping the general audience in bubble wrap wasn't enough of a problem, being stingy with the cross-platform definitely hasn't helped either. PC VR players can still play things like VRchat and Rec Room with Quest players, but most of the smaller indie titles either don't have cross-platform support, or Meta will only have them if they choose to be a Quest exclusive. On top of all of that, Meta's takeover of VR has been relatively disappointing in terms of games released as well. When Valve dropped the Index, it released with Half-Life Alyx, the first real AAA VR title, and Meta still hasn't had any major projects aside from the metaverse, which was, well...
Do you have a favorite feature to use in here?
Yeah.
Something that you think is very cool?
Check this out.
Wow.
So that's pretty neat.
This is so freaking cool.
Despite all of the terrible things Meta has done for the VR community, what they have managed to do is produce affordable headsets to the masses without the need for a 2,000 quid computer. Gone are the days where you needed to use half the savings for a house deposit to buy a VR headset, but at the cost of it being stripped away from you at any moment. Now that I've got the rough couple of years VR has had under the thumb of Meta out of the way, I think there's actually a lot of hope for the future of the industry. As much as I'd love to, I'm not going to sit here and tell you a fairy tale about how some amazing game like the Oasis from Ready Player One's about to release and blow your mind, but there is plenty of signs, and one massive development, that suggests VR is back on the rise, and it could even reach its peak once again, but I'll get back to that. In terms of the positives we've seen for VR in the past few years, there's quite a lot. Firstly, games like VRchat still have a dedicated fan base that produces loads of creator-made content regularly, and although my only experience with the game is some dodgy 40-year-old bloke buying me and my friend Discord Nitro in lockdown, it's still pretty cool to see that so many people still play it regularly, although hopefully it's just to hang out with friends online. Developers also seem to be slowly coming back to VR, now that Meta started to revive the market, with some big titles like Deadpool and Batman VR games being released, and even a game about The Boys being announced literally today as of the time of this recording. Even though most of those games are Quest exclusive, it's still nice to see that VR is still carrying on, waiting for the next big innovation to fully restart the wave of popularity. It's not all bad for PC VR though. Modding communities for games like Blade and Sorcery, Half-Life Alyx, and even Beat Saber have had some massive successes over the years, even going so far as to make entirely new games inside of the games themselves. Even non-VR games have had modern efforts by the community to make them VR compatible, with games like Minecraft, Half-Life 2, and more recently Ready or Not having them made. It kind of reflects how VR is starting to become more accepted as a way of playing games again, rather than just a gimmick. As well as all of that, the VR content scene's still going steady. Some of the best VR YouTubers like Lolathon still regularly make high quality long form content that I and many others enjoy watching, and with the popularity of TikTok and Reels, plenty of questionable clips from VR games have surfaced, exposing a whole new demographic to it. But most importantly, last week, pretty much everything about VR changed. I think it's about time to mention the main development of the industry recently, another thing that happened to be announced whilst I was in the process of making this video. The Valve Decade. Wait. The Steam Frame. If you somehow haven't already heard, Valve's secret project that they've been working on behind the scenes along with the Steam Machine was a brand new VR headset called the Steam Frame. It's pretty much a Quest, except it gets rid of nearly every problem people have had with the Quest. The problem being Meta. This thing can run your entire Steam VR library standalone, but also comes with a completely wireless connection if you want to play more graphically demanding games using a PC. Now I'm not going to get into all the fancy technical details about it because I'm not Linus Tech Tips and I don't really know, but honestly this thing is really exciting. Meta spent about 5 years making loss after loss to expand the VR market and keep it going, and Valve comes along with a newer, shinier version of their hardware to reclaim the market. So I suppose the question is, was it worth losing $70 billion to make the market bigger, just for Steam to come and take that market away from them? I don't f***ing care, it's not my money. This new headset is a huge step for VR, like Valve has just pushed it out of the nest to prepare it to fly. It's not just about the specs of the headset itself, but it's more about what it can mean for the industry, and for consumers. You don't have to rely on Meta's ecosystem to use your headset anymore. You can finally have true wireless PC VR done right, and Valve's ecosystem is built to support VR properly. The Steam Frame could honestly be a massive turning point. If it's anywhere near as affordable as the Quest is, Meta could really be left behind, and it's great hardware both for dedicated VR players and for newcomers. The direction towards a more general audience that it has should hopefully help VR grow outside of the current size and reach more people, maybe even being adopted outside of just for gaming, like Meta tried to do commercially. The thing is, VR started to die because the audience shrank. And the audience shrank because headsets were really impractical and expensive, and now there's finally some solutions for these issues. The Quest has already proved that a great, affordable standalone headset's possible, and the Steam Frame looks like it's going to address most of the issues that people have had with Meta's standalone headsets so far. If Valve releases a new game like Alex alongside the Steam Frame, VR could actually be back. Content creators, modders, indie devs, and even many games' player bases never fully left. In fact, I think what a lot of people considered to be the end of VR's life cycle a couple of years ago could actually just be the start. When you see the massive differences in the hardware available in 2016 to now, only a decade later, there's no reason why VR can't keep on evolving and growing over the years. The fact that both Meta and Valve remain so vigilant with VR and are trying to stay competitive and innovate makes it pretty clear that they both know the audience is there for VR, now that the hardware is finally starting to catch up with people's needs. Playing VR finally won't involve a big setup and having what feels like a TV strapped to your head, with these new headsets weighing less and less and being able to just turn on and play straight away. So to answer my question of whether VR can make a comeback, I fully think it can. If people can get their hands on one of the most immersive experiences that's both affordable and convenient, I can absolutely see VR becoming much more mainstream, as it once was. Even though I wish I could just say, "Computer, generate me a popular VR game like the Oasis," I still think we're a long way away from that. But if the Steam Frame is successful and developers start to come back to working on VR games, maybe one day we'll see something similar. For now, the future of VR is looking hopeful. After a rocky couple of years for the industry, the next wave of popularity looks like it could finally be in the works, and one day, maybe VR can make its comeback. My name is Joester, and that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the future of VR for now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and if you need me, I'll be in the corner praying that Steam Frame doesn't get delayed like GTA 6 has been. See ya!